Well, hey everyone. Thanks for checking out this video. I really want to thank Kathy, and she can just talk a bit, maybe in a second, about kind of her background, and as we talk about some of the mental health implications and maybe some ways that we can navigate that. So, Kathy, why don't you just share a bit about your background?
Sure. So I'm a marriage and family therapist. I've been doing this for about 9 years. I work with individuals, couples, families, not so much children, in the Perth and Kingston area. Since all this COVID stuff came down, every psychotherapist has been asked to suspend face-to-face sessions, and we're all doing it by video, which has been a big adjustment for everybody. But I know Paul through our church affiliation. We've known each other how many years, Paul?
9.
Lots of years. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, I'm happy to talk about what I can share about the aspects of mental health and COVID.
That's awesome. Okay, so today we're talking a bit about stress, and
Yeah.
so can you just talk about some of the things that are kind of contributing to our stress right now?
Yeah, for sure. So to start off, what I would really like to say is that this is a really hard time for everybody. And I think I just want to validate that from the get-go, that this is very hard. And sometimes just giving ourselves permission to go, oh, wow, I'm not crazy because I'm feeling stressed. These are hard times, right? And so I've been thinking about, what are the stressors? And Paul, you may be able to add some, but the things I've been thinking about were, the loss of normalcy, the loss of the predictability of our lives. I get up, I get in my car, I go to work, 5 o'clock, I come home, supper, put the kids to bed. That whole schedule is gone out, and we are creatures of habit. So even just that loss of normalcy is tough. Our movements are restricted. We can't go out and about the way we normally do. I remember going to the grocery store a few weeks ago, and I had to line up outside in the cold, and there were 40 people. Just going to the grocery store I could feel my own stress levels coming up because it's not my norm. And then the lineup to get out was like probably 50 people deep. So, that can be stressful, just standing there and waiting. So those kinds of things. Time. We've got all so much more time on our hands. Well, if we're home. So for some of us, it's like, what do I do with myself? That can be a real stressor, right? Or maybe for people who are still working, not enough time, for the healthcare workers and all that. Another huge stressor is, the loss of our normal contacts, the people we rub shoulders with every day, having those normal interactions in the store, hugging your kids. Well, maybe you can hug your kids, Paul. I can't hug my kids because they're all grown up. I can't see my grandkids. I don't see my friends in the same way that I normally do. And even though I'm an introvert, I am really missing that. And I think that that's across the board. I think especially about people who are living alone and, they don't even have somebody to be with in their own home. That is really hard, So the loss of friendships, the loss of our rituals, for many of us who belong to a faith community, it's the touchstone of going to church every Sunday and, and joining in worship or whatever that looks like for you. Those normal rituals are gone. Boredom, angst, ennui. Something that I've really noticed, as I've had to make the shift from face-to-face sessions to going to video, there's been a special stress around new technology. I had to purchase a new computer. What kind of computer do I get? My internet is a little bit spotty. I've had to learn how to use Zoom and how to use House Party and how to use my online video counseling platform. So that's actually created a little bit of stress for me. And I suspect for a lot of people, they've never had to use Zoom or Skype because they just would see people on the street. So I think that has created stress for some people. So added to that is, for many people, not so much in Westport, but certainly in the States and in Toronto and Ottawa, we're losing people. We're losing people. And maybe we haven't lost someone directly connected, but I think we feel like it's a shared grief at all the losses that we're facing. And then add to that is what happened in Nova Scotia this week.
Yeah.
Just that loss of normal. So those are the things that came to mind for me. Some of this stuff is, I was thinking, it can be more or less stressful depending on your personality too. Like if you're a person who just kind of rolls with the punches all the time, this probably isn't as stressful as it is for somebody who needs to have a tight sense of control in their life. And personality wise is, am I an introvert or am I an extrovert? For introverts, this is probably a much easier time. For extroverts who kind of get their energy from being around people all the time, Paul. Tell me what that's like, Paul.
This isn't my session.
Yeah, so those are all stressors that, that I've been thinking about.
Yeah, I think, I think that's that important thing, is just affirming that regardless of the situation, even if you're not a frontline worker, it's still stressful,
Yeah.
And like Kelly's like, you got to do the grocery shopping, Paul, because just going to the grocery store, even though she knows, folks that could drink and that, it's a stressful environment. There's how close can I be to somebody? Is somebody going to shout, stand back, or anything like that, and that's so hard.
And that's one thing that I forgot to talk about is, for families who still have kids at home, parents who get into I know I've got 3 hours when the kids are in school when I can do X, Y, Z, right? But the children are there 24/7 now, right? And the kids are missing their friends, and the kids are missing their school and their regular rituals. So on top of parents having to deal with their own loss of normalcy, they have to be a comfort for their kids. And as we were talking about a while ago, Paul, parents at home with little ones or with teenagers, they're also frontline workers. They have to be nurse, doctor, teacher, laundry person, cook. They have to be everything for their kids right now. That adds a lot of stress to parents and families.
Absolutely. Now, as much as I said this isn't my session, I think the thing I want to ask you about is, it's one thing to acknowledge that there's stress. I tend to not be an anxious person just by nature. But as I was thinking about us this morning, when I woke up, when I was thinking about us having this conversation, I thought, wow, I woke up at 5 a.m. again, which is not normal for me. I am I actually literally yesterday, I bought some blackout blinds. I thought, oh, it's just a light or something. I woke up this morning, pitch black, 5 a.m. I'm just like, wow. I was hoping it would be like just some black paper in the windows would solve it, but no, there's something more. And so like the stress is having impacts on us mentally and physically. Can you talk about that a bit?
Yeah, for sure. So I would say that we are biologically wired to respond to threat, right? So, I know that it's easy for us to cut down ourselves from being afraid. I'm afraid. I shouldn't be afraid. I'm safe at home and I'm all this. But we are wired to respond to threats so that we can survive. And whether or not we are particularly in danger, we hear about it on the news. There's a part of our brain called the amygdala that gets all fired up and can send us into a fight or flight response to either real or perceived threat. And when that happens, we lose I don't want to get too technical here, but we lose the ability to respond in the ways that we normally would. We tend to be a little bit more reactive. So, I've heard I've talked with a friend the other day, and she said, I was in the grocery store and I came within 3 feet of somebody instead of 6, and they yelled at me. They yelled at me. And I suspect that person would never have done that if they weren't so on edge themselves, right? So our bodies produce cortisol, and it gives us the ability to fight or flee or freeze. And that's a normal thing, right? It's a biologically, physically wired response. So the real question is, what do we do about it?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I always know fight or flight, but you said freeze. I know
Yeah,
that just really tweaked to me that like, I think when I talk to people, like so many of us just feel like frozen, like,
yeah,
but yeah, what,
yeah.
what, what are some things we can do?
Uh, number
This is
one
totally
is to
my session
notice.
now, by the way.
Number one, I think, is to pay attention to what's happening to you. You know, when you find yourself yelling at your kids or being short with your husband or, unable to sleep, kind of go, wow, I am actually feeling really stressed. And it's okay. It's okay for me to feel stressed. These are really difficult times. So the question is, what can I do to reduce my stress levels? So I would ask questions like, how much are you listening to the news? Right? Because the news these days is all pretty bad. And I think for all of us, we have to find that sweet spot between living in a bubble in our homes, if that's even possible in these days, or being so over-informed that we find ourselves in this really escalated, anxious state all the time. So I've talked with some people who say, I can't even listen to the news anymore. So I've asked my spouse or I've asked my friend if they could, because they aren't as triggered, if they can listen to the news and tell me what I need to know in this time, because I just can't handle it, right? Sorry, I think I lost my train of thought there, Paul.
Yeah, it's those practical things that we can
What can I do?
do, right?
Yeah,
Like measure the news, right?
right. So
Yeah.
that's one thing we can do. The other thing I would really encourage people to do is to do really good, as much as you can in your situation, do really good self-care. So self-care, sometimes when I put that out to my clients, they go, oh, I can't do that. That's really selfish. And I would say, no, self-care is not selfish. Self-care is what we need to do to take care of ourselves so that we can take care of other people. It's that classic example of when you're sitting on an airplane and they do that spiel before you take off, and they say, if you're sitting beside a vulnerable person, make sure you put your own oxygen mask on before you turn and help the other person. So self-care is not self-indulgence. It's taking good care of ourselves so that we're more available to other people to be the help that they need for them. So, for you, whether that's taking time alone in the day, whether that's going for a walk, whether that's doing a workout or taking a hot bath when you need to, or making sure you're staying in touch with your friends, right? I don't know, maybe Paul, you can think of some other examples of good self-care.
Well, I mean, one, just as a parent right now, you get really interesting messages from the school in terms of, and love our teachers, right? But it's kind of like, hey, like here's work to do at home, but don't make that your priority, which is great advice. But then it's like, so here's when everything's due. And then, so you have this dueling thing of, you're like, I don't want to be a bad parent here, but like maybe today we just don't do schoolwork, right? But then
Right.
again, it's like, I think about it and it doesn't feel like a big thing, but it's just another thing,
Yeah.
And it's not
Yeah.
that it's just one stressor, it's just
Yeah.
all of these little ones, and,
Yeah.
and the big ones too.
So if you notice yourself, being short with the kids or being too hard on them, or like that you're yelling, kind of go, this is not a good time for me to be teaching. I'm not in a state where I can be helpful to the kids. And it's okay to let yourself off the hook and say, I'm doing the best I can today, and that's going to be good enough, right? The kids are going to survive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially if I do self-care, then they'll really survive.
They will really survive. So the other thing I think is important is, when you find yourself feeling really anxious, usually when we're triggered or we're like that, we're not living in the present. We're worried about the future. Well, we may be living in the present, but a lot of times it's, what's going to happen with my job, or what's going to happen with the economy, or what's going to happen with whatever. It's just to kind of go, oh, wow, I'm feeling really anxious. Bring it back to this moment. And most of the time, for most of us, in this moment, right here, right now, everything's okay. My kids are fine. My spouse is fine. I've got food in the cupboard. I still have a roof over my head. The government is helping me with finances. Like, just to bring it right back to here and notice what's happening right now, rather than living in the future, which just creates anxiety for us, right? Yeah.
Okay. Now,
Um,
sorry, did you have another one? Please.
yeah, I think when we were talking before we started this, Paul, I was outside this morning clearing brush on our property. And for me, that physical engagement, getting out of my head and doing something with my hands and my body, is really, really helpful. So whatever that looks like for people, getting out, getting a walk, going for a run, getting some kind of exercise, and outside is a good place to be because that actually helps our mental health. But just doing something with our bodies can be really a good stress management tool.
That's awesome. Okay. So Kathy, at the end of this video, I'm going to be putting up, and maybe this can be kind of our concluding thought, if you can help with this, is I'm going to be putting up, like, different helplines and people that you can call.
Yeah.
Like, I remember a while back with one of our kids, they were really struggling, and we called I think Lanark Leeds Children's Mental Health Network,
Yeah.
and got amazing help. But it can be
Yeah.
very scary to make that call.
Yeah.
So can you just talk a bit about kind of what to expect if you were to call one of these services? Because I want us to kind of take the stigma out, and just to
Yeah.
keep our thought about, do we have to be like just ripping our hair out, or at what point do we call, and what
No.
can we expect?
I would say it's good to make the call before you're ripping your hair out. What you're going to find on the other end is a person who's trained to listen, who's trained to ask good questions, who's trained to be very non-judgmental and grounded and help you think through your situation and help you to de-escalate. Most of those people are really safe people, and whatever it is you're feeling, they're not going to judge you for it. They're going to ask you about it, but they're not going to say you shouldn't feel that way. They're going to say, tell me about that. Tell me what's happening for you. So don't wait until you're pulling your hair out. Don't wait until you're at the end of your rope. They're there to help you. It's a free service, so do call.
Okay, that's awesome. Kathy, thank you so much. This isn't the last one that we're going to do. And I just want to encourage people. We set up an email, westportasks@gmail.com, and you'll see it at the bottom of the screen here. And if you have questions in terms of mental health and things like that you'd like to ask, and maybe hear Kathy speak to that, then just email the questions in there. It'll be totally confidential, and your name won't be said out here, and I won't even give Kathy your name. So just send that question along, and we'll see if we can address it. But again, thank you, Kathy, so much for
You're so
doing that.
welcome.